My name is Max Raimi. I've been playing viola in the Chicago Symphony for nearly 40 years now. Along with being some of the most beloved and familiar music in our repertoire, the Bach Brandenburg concertos have to rank as the most remarkable employment application in the history of job searches. You see, Bach was kind of stuck working and living in a backwater, a little town of Kirchen, Germany, and he was hoping to get a position at the Brandenburg court up in Berlin. So he gathered up these 6 concertos, which he had composed over the previous several years, and he sent them to the Margrave of Brandenburg. That's why they're called the Brandenburg concertos. He was hoping that the powers that be would look them over and maybe offer him a job, but it didn't quite work out. In fact, we have no hard evidence that anybody at the Brandenburg court so much as glanced at this extraordinary music. For all we know, it seems like they put it on a shelf and it sat there undisturbed, gathering dust for generation after generation. The first documented instance we have of a performance of any of the Brandenburg concertos took place in 1835, 85 years after Bach had died. You know, when we see the word concerto on a program, perhaps we envision one of the great romantic concertos, maybe Brahms or Tchaikovsky, and we have in our imagination a virtuoso soloist dazzling us with great technical fireworks and deeply felt emotional playing. These concertos by Bach are from a very different, earlier tradition of concerto writing, something called the concerto grosso. And what this entails is a small group of featured instrumentalists in contrast with the larger orchestra. In the 6th Brandenburg, the featured instrumentalists play my instrument, the viola. There's 2 viola solos, and you know, it's a little unorthodox to have the viola as the concerto soloist. As a violist, I can say this. It really isn't in our DNA to draw that much attention to ourselves. We are not typically the centers of attention. Actually, you know, our voice is in the middle of the orchestral texture. So it's not really in our nature to soar above the orchestra and catch your eye that way. And we don't have the sheer volume to push through the orchestral texture like, I don't know, a piano or a trumpet might. No, the viola's superpower, if I may say so, is that we make everybody else better. The viola is the ideal instrument for collaborating and supporting and harmonizing, for observing what is going on around us and responding to it. And nobody understood this better than Johann Sebastian Bach. There's this wonderful letter that his son, Carl Philipp Emanuel, wrote. In reminiscing about his father, he said, Johann Sebastian loved best to play the viola. With his profound understanding of harmony, he wanted to be right in the middle of things. We hear this so clearly in the 6th Brandenburg concerto. The 2 viola soloists spin these beautiful lines of melody that intertwine around each other and harmonize with each other and imitate each other. And it creates this gorgeous, profound, and loving dialogue. I am hardly unbiased as a violist, but to my mind, especially the middle movement of this piece, the slow movement, is among the most beautiful things that any human being, let alone Bach, ever created. The 3rd Brandenburg, if anything, subverts our idea of what a concerto ought to be to even a greater extent. There really is no dichotomy, no distinction between the featured soloist and the larger orchestra. There's a sort of harmonic scaffolding of harpsichord and bass line, very typical of Bach's time, and then there's 3 violins, 3 violas, and 3 cellos, all playing their own part. It has to be the most egalitarian concerto ever written. At any moment and at any one of these instruments might take a little star turn or some little subset attract our attention. It creates this wonderful protein texture that spins, that rotates around, and from moment to moment, a facet grabs our attention, shines for a moment, and then recedes. You know, as I said, Bach loved the viola, but it also must be said that he wrote 6 pieces for solo violin, sonatas and partitas. 300 years later, they're unsurpassed, generally regarded as the greatest music ever written for solo violin. He wrote 6 suites for solo cello, 300 years later unsurpassed, generally regarded as the greatest music ever written for solo cello. When we as string players play these Brandenburg concertos, we know from the first note that we are in the hands of an absolute master at writing for our instrument. You know, sometimes I feel like if, for some reason, no sound was coming out of my viola, and I was just going through the physical motions that Bach requires to bring this music to life, this physical task in and of itself would bring me great joy. So intimately, so profoundly does Bach understand exactly what he's asking us to do. Thank you so much for joining us. We deeply appreciate your support in these crazy times.